Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. The Dragon Pod, from Bending Not Breaking. Book 4, Earth. Chapter 9, Escape from Umber Tor. Welcome back to another episode of the Dragon Pod. This is Ben Pruitt, your host, and I am really kind of sad that this is episode 9. We have come to the end of season 4 of the Dragon Prince, and man, what a season it has been. And I am just incredibly grateful to all of the guests that have joined us so far, but also really excited that I get to share one more guest with you all this season. It's my pleasure to introduce Sasha Rojen, uses she, her pronouns, as an exceptional actor where you can find in shows like Bates Motel, Supergirl, The Flash, but you'll probably know her best for her inspirational work in The Dragon Prince as the voice of Ezran. Sasha isn't just an accomplished actor, though, also an accomplished competitive gymnast, which I was really surprised when I learned this. That was really cool. We're thrilled to welcome you, Sasha. How are you today?
I'm pretty good, and life has been pretty good so far.
Tell me about your history with being a gymnast. I had no idea until I started reading about you that that was true.
Um, I was at a pretty high level. I stopped when I was around 12 to 13 years old. I used to go to Omega Gymnastics, but it recently shut down due to like COVID reasons. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since I was about 2 years old, I think.
Wow.
And I started doing it because my sister was in it.
Okay. How old's your sister?
She's 23 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool. I love hearing about the things that the voice actors do on the side of their work, and that's such a neat thing to always learn that people are multifaceted, which of course people are, but sometimes we don't realize it until we learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that it's snowing where you are right now. I'm curious, just for funsies, for people who are listening from around snowy areas, what's something you really enjoy doing in the snow?
I love building snowmen, um, taking like making snow angels, and I love sledding. There's like we live on a hill, so I could just walk up to the top of the hill and just sled all the way down, and all of my friends live around me, so we like to make trails and like stomp them down so that they're icy, and then we all like slide down.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, that's awesome. I'm kind of jealous. I don't see enough snow very often to go sledding. There was one time when I was really a lot younger that we had a big snowfall, and that was like the last time I really remember like sledding. Um,
Really?
yeah, it was a while ago. We don't like there's very rarely do we get enough snow to do anything
Yeah.
with, which is kind of a bummer. So
Yeah. I guess I'm pretty lucky with like where I live and
yeah,
how it
plenty of
is
snow, it
here.
sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Okay. So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing. We know that you voice Ezran, but what's your relationship with the Dragon Prince outside of that? Like how did you find this? Like what's kind of the backstory of that?
So actually how I got into the Dragon Prince, I auditioned, of course, like anyone else. But the thing is, like the part that I find funny, me and my brother, we had probably 10 to 15 minutes to film the audition. And I had nowhere to film it because we didn't set up like normally we set up this little booth so that we can film auditions, or we put a blanket over our heads and we have a mic and then we start talking. But we just had no time. So we were like, okay, let's just do this. I'm definitely not going to get the role anyways because this is for a boy and I've never gotten like a boy role before. Like, I'm not going to get this. So we went into our laundry room because that was like the quietest place. And he helped me film this because I was about 10 years old or 11 years old at the time. And I'm just sitting there with my iPad in front of me and I start talking and I'm gonna be honest, like I didn't try as much as I should have. Like I didn't try at all. And like you can hear people in the background. It's just a, it was a pretty bad audition. But then like they called me and they're like, "Hey, like can you come in for
Huh.
a callback?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I can." And I went in and then we ended up talking in there for like 30 minutes, and that's the longest callback I've ever done. Like it was crazy, and they also told me a bunch of stories about them, so I got to know them better too.
Oh, that's cool.
And I from then I kind of just knew like, oh, I think I just got the role. Like I was in there for half an hour. Like this is so
Wow.
cool.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And then like they told me, and my sister filmed my reaction because she's the one that actually told me because she got the call. And then she went outside and she filmed me like from going home from school. And I just like started jumping around doing cartwheels. I just like couldn't help it. It was so
Yeah.
cool.
That's amazing. Well, that's really cool to hear. I had no idea. That's a fun little story.
Yeah.
Like it's always interesting to like think about how when I watch the show, I just am like, that's these are the voices. They like had this in the bag from the very beginning. Like there wasn't a process. They just are these people. And just
Yeah.
to hear the stories of how it comes to be is always really a treat. So thank you for sharing that. That's so fun.
Thank you.
Um, well, uh, you've kind of already given us a little bit of this, but we're going to transition into our next segment, which is the primal source. And that was a really cool primal source material. But I want to get into primal source, just talking about this episode that we're talking about today, which is episode 9, the last one of the season. And I'm curious, like what is a moment that you found interesting in the making of this episode, or any details that would be fun to share about?
When I was in the booth the whole time that I was recording this episode, I remember me and my sister playing rock, paper, scissors. We were just playing a bunch of like hand games because there's this piece of like I was in a separate room from her, but she can see me through the glass and like the whole time we're kind of just like playing on the side. And this one time I actually got it in the recording on accident when we were playing rock, paper, scissors. So all you can hearing is like the slapping of my hand. And I felt so embarrassed. I was like, oh no. So we had to record it and I was like, oh gosh. I'm lucky that it was only like one I'm lucky that it was only one little scene, but it was fine. It ended up being fine.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Did you win? Like, what's your strategy?
I
Rock,
did
paper,
not
scissors?
win. She
Oh
won
man.
against me like several times.
Oh no. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we'll have to practice more because that's a lifelong skill you have to have, is how to win at rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's so cool. Like I can't like again, it's so fun to hear just uh the humanity behind the making of the show, right? Where like we just get to recognize how much people of how much of a how do you say that, how people like we are even in the making of something that seems so well done and well crafted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, well we've gotten through our first segment, which is really exciting. We're going to move on to our second one, and this is where we kind of unpack the lens. And we I kind of contacted you really early on about, hey, would you be willing to do this? And uh it is really exciting that we landed on this episode for you, because we kind of asked and was tossing around several lens options, and ultimately we landed on this lens of bravery. And so I would love it if you could help me kind of, why did we choose this lens? And then if you have any stories about bravery, and I'd love to hear that too.
I think I chose the lens of bravery, like specifically because Ezran is a very brave person, and especially for his age, what he has to do, he's very brave for what he has to do, and he doesn't have many people around him that he can especially trust. And I feel like he's just gone through so much, and he's learned to be brave. He's learned to be older and mature faster, which sucks, but that's what comes with being brave and standing up for himself. And I have to be very brave in my own personal life. And I have like a lot of stories about bravery. And recently I've had to be brave in a lot of situations. My friend was going through a really rough time and I had to be very brave for her. And I remember sitting there with her for 4 hours trying to help her. She was having panic attacks and just passing out in and out, and I was the only one there to help. And I felt alone, but I had to be brave for her as much as I wanted to cry, as much as I wanted to just not, go through this, or I just couldn't be in the room anymore. I had to be there. I had to help her. And I don't know, I've had to be brave for a lot of things, but a funny bravery story that just happened was there's a rat at my house.
Oh
My yeah, my bunnies made friends with the rat. And I actually named him Remy the rat because I like Ratatouille
no.
and
Yeah.
whatnot. And my mom came up to me in the morning. We're about to head off to school, and she's like, "Hey, I need help with the bunnies. Can you help me, please? I think there's a rat outside. I just need you to like kick a box and just make sure there's no rat. Just stay outside with me, please." I'm like, "Okay." Like that sounds fine. And of course, I'm a little bit scared because I haven't seen a rat up close in person ever. I've seen them like scuttling, but only like the tails of them or something. I've never actually seen one in person. And I go outside and I start kicking the box. I'm like, okay, if a rat jumps out, I'll like start screaming. I can't do this right now. But I did it anyways because I'm like, I gotta be there for my mom, and she's asked me to do this. We need to feed the bunnies. I got this. I got this. The chance like there being a rat in here is pretty low. I got this. And then I start kicking it and it's fine. My mom gets the food, starts feeding the bunnies, blah, 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 blah. And then I kick the box one more time because I'm like, I kind of hear some scuttling. So I kick it twice
Mhm.
and a rat just jumps out and we both just start screaming and we run inside the house and it was the scariest thing. It was big, like it was huge and it was gray too. It was very scary. The rat has come around a lot since, but I gotta be brave. We gotta feed the bunnies. We gotta protect the bunnies. Yeah, we have to take them inside now because one of our bunnies is letting the rat eat her food, which is why it keeps on coming back. And it's
Yeah.
also cold now, so it's thinking of that place as like a nice food and home to stay
This
at,
is
which
like a great
sucks.
place to
But
live. Yeah.
yeah, so we have to make sure that she's okay because we can't let the rat eat her food anymore because that's
Yeah.
dangerous. So we have to take them inside.
Wow. How many bunnies?
Yeah, I have two bunnies, but we used to have six,
Ooh.
but we had to give them away because our two bunnies mated and then they had bunnies.
Yep. So it goes.
Yeah.
Well, dang. Okay. So just to kind of unpack bravery a little bit based off of your story, I'm hearing that bravery involves a little bit of fear, it seems like. So it sounds like with your friend, there was, I'm curious what it was there fear in that situation, or and was it fear of like I don't know what to do, or I have to keep a brave face? I'm curious, like what was what made you feel like that was bravery as opposed to something else?
There was a lot of fear because she was so scared that she started throwing up, and I'm not good with like that
Mhm.
sort of thing, like at
Yeah.
all. I can't deal with that if it comes out of me. Can't deal with that. I will start having a panic attack. But she was having a very big panic attack. But as much as I was scared and I didn't know what to do, I had to be there for her, and she was all I cared about in that moment. I didn't care if I didn't know what to do. I just tried to help her as much as I could because as long as she's okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And we aren't that close. Like I would consider her an acquaintance, but we definitely got closer. But I was very surprised that I was one of the only people there to help her, which sucked, but I'm happy that I was there to help because I don't know who else would have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like if you had a choice, bravery is not the option that you would. You don't want to have to be brave. It sounds like it would
Yeah.
like rather it things like be just like everything's going well. I don't need to be brave, right? So it sounds like bravery is uh, something that we don't want to have to live into, and also something that when we are put in a situation that requires it, something we really want to be able to do at the same time.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's the same thing with the rat, perhaps on a lower scale than it was with your friend, but like,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
don't I don't want to go into this situation because there's a giant rodent like and what'll
Yeah.
happen what and like
Yeah.
all the things that could happen with that. So there's this interesting situation with like thinking about what bravery is and what it requires of us and like the prerequisites for it at the same time. So Interesting, really interesting. I'm really excited to kind of unpack the moments in this episode because it seems like there are a lot of situations that happen in this episode where people are forced into making decisions, and sometimes they make brave decisions and sometimes they're less brave decisions. And so I can't wait to unpack that. But before we do, we have to make sure that we remind our listeners of the episode content. So we're going to do a 30-second recap. And, we've prepared for this. We knew this was coming a little. And I'm going to let you have the honors of going first. So I'm going to
Okay.
put 30 seconds on the clock. And are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
As ready as you're going to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
All right. I'm going to give you a count of three. Three, two, one, go.
Basically, in this episode of The Dragon Prince, um, Ezran, Callum, Rayla, and there's also the bad guys, well, quote unquote bad guys, Claudia, Viren, those people, they are trying to get the map from Rex Igneous, and we don't know where the map is. And Callum, Rayla, we all go up to Rex Igneous. We ask him, "Where's Erebos's lair? Where's it at?" And then we solve the riddle and we find
Ding.
out that that was a lot faster than I thought.
Yeah, 30 seconds goes by fast. Like it's
Yeah,
super intense. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and reset the clock, and if you'll just count me down from three, I will start it and we will get ready to do
sounds
my
good.
best. All right. Count me down whenever you're ready.
Three, two, one.
Okay, so here's the deal. Here's the deal. Map is on the tooth. There's a map tooth, and then Janai and Kareem are going to fight, and it's going to be a big deal. And then the Goop copies the tooth map because Terry's brilliant. And then Rex is on the rampage because like all the things are going down, and it's super scary, and like they're being chased out of the tunnel, and Rex is super mad, and Claudia's like, haha, coins, and Rayla's like, ah, and then Zubea's like, roar, roar, and they roar at each other, and then that's the end of the episode, and that's my time. Woo!
That was amazing. That was really good.
It,
Wow.
like it's like how are you supposed to cover everything? There's so much that happens, and then there's 30 seconds, and what's like, good grief.
You did
Why do I
that
make
really
myself do
well.
this? Like this is terrible. Why do we do this? Okay. Anyway, I digress. All right. So again, so many cool things that are happening in this episode, and this is a really neat lens. So I'd love to just pass it to you. Like, what is a moment of bravery that you want to discuss in this episode?
Um, I'm gonna start with Ezran. I
Absolutely.
think that a moment of bravery was when he went up to Rex Igneous, and when Rex Igneous was having a full-on mental breakdown, just like smashing everything, not listening to anyone.
He was
Ezran was
unhappy.
like, yeah, like he was very unhappy. And Ezran went up to him and was like, "Hey, dude, like, calm down. You got this." And Ezran is being so brave because he could get killed. He could get smashed by rocks. Like anything could happen at this very moment. And
Yeah.
he was brave enough to step up and say, "Hey, we're not with Claudia and Terry and Viren. Like, we're not with them. We're on a separate side. We need you to tell us where, like, the map is. We need help with this. Like, we can't do this without you. And you need to calm down because we need to be able to talk to you. You need to listen to our side of the story."
Yeah.
And he wasn't willing to calm down. And Ezrin still stayed, so much so that he was almost going to get killed if it wasn't for someone saving him.
Yeah, this is a really interesting moment for me too, because I think depending on who watches this, um, someone might look at Ezran and say, that's not bravery, that's just naivety, right? Ezran's just being naive. Like that's a rampaging dragon. You boy need to get out the way, right?
Yeah.
But I love that you're framing this under a bravery lens because I think that's what honestly makes Ezran such a cool character generally is that Ezran often chooses the hard choice and chooses to um big feelings time between and I think he's willing to lean into that. But on the other side of that, what I really like about this moment is you calling asking for help bravery, right?
Mhm.
The whole like leading up to this episode is them trying to get help from Rex Igneous. And that in and of itself seems like a really brave thing to do, to just ask for help generally from someone is often to me requires bravery, right?
Yeah.
Is that your experience as well? Like asking people for help, do you experience that as bravery?
Like personally or
Yeah.
as, yeah. No, because I still go to school,
Yeah.
and if I am to ask one of my teachers something, it takes a lot of bravery because I'm
Yeah.
scared of getting turned down or like, oh, that's a stupid question. You shouldn't be asking
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, or you should have been listening. Because that's happened to me multiple times, but it's happened so much that I'm scared to ask.
Mm,
And I feel like asking a question is bravery. Raising your hand in that classroom is bravery. And what Ezran has done and what he's doing is bravery. He's asking questions. He is telling a big giant dragon, as much as people might think he's naive, he's telling a big giant dragon that
yeah.
he needs to calm down and he's asking him a question. That takes a lot of bravery because if someone, even if they were naive, is to go up to a big dragon, they're probably not going to ask if it's just naivety. They're going to ask because it's brave. Like
Yeah.
you might be scared, but you're gonna still be like, hey, we need to get this information out of you because the world rests on our hands. We need your
Yeah.
help.
I mean, I definitely experience asking for help as bravery, like
Yeah.
personally myself, because like, and I think for you, I heard that the fear behind the ask is potentially like humiliation, because if they respond and say you should have been listening, you're like, oh my bad, and then you feel the rush of embarrassment or humiliation, and that's not the thing you want to experience, right? And
Yeah.
especially in front of your peers who are may or may not be like, oh my god, what a dummy. um
Yeah.
and so like there's like this um double judgment, like one from your teacher but also from your peers. And so if we frame that in terms of what Ezran's doing, Ezran seems more than anybody else willing to put himself in harm's way to ask this question, and so to be brave. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what is it about Ezran that makes him the one to do this as opposed to somebody else? Like what is it about him or his background and history that allows him to do that, and do you think?
Um, Personally, I think it's the fact that he lost both of his parents. He has no one to
Mhm.
rely on. He has to be brave for a kingdom. He's a king now at
Oh,
11 years old,
yeah.
and he has to rule all alone. He wasn't taught how to rule because he was cut short of that teaching.
Hmm.
And he has to be brave for like probably a million people, hundreds of thousands of people, just so that he can protect everyone. He wants to protect his kingdom. That's all he's caring about right now. If I
Wow.
was him in this moment, I would just be caring about the people that I'm protecting. I wouldn't care if my life was in danger. I'm caring about the people that I'm protecting.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. I think I get locked into this mode of Ezran. Ezran, of course, wants to do the right thing. And it seems like he also is really caught up in his relationship with dragons and his relationship with Zadia, really, right? Between the human kingdoms and Zadia at large. And like really wanting that relationship to thrive versus I hadn't really thought about like the burden of having all of these people expecting this to go well and hoping this to go well. And
Mhm.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense that he'd be fearful for his people. um
Yeah.
oh god, and what a tough burden to have at 11 years old. That's a
Yeah.
huge burden.
Yeah.
Oof, man, that's really neat. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
I did not, I don't know why I didn't think about that, but that's a really neat, this is what a cool, like, thank you, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Insight. Turns out talking to the person who spent a lot of time with the character has insight. There's one thing we've learned this season, that is to be true. Awesome. So, what else? What's anything else about this moment, or is there another moment of bravery that you want to talk about?
There's another moment, and it's with Rayla when she has to be brave, and she puts one of her blades to Terry's neck in order to get
Ooh.
Claudia to either stop or something because she knows that Claudia cares about Terry a lot. She
Mhm.
sees that Claudia cares about him. And she even states that in the episode. And Claudia would do anything for him, and she can see that. So she wants something in return. She either wants Claudia to hand herself over or something in return from Claudia. And she obviously knows what she wants. And I feel like that takes a lot of bravery to almost take a person's life or to be on the verge of doing that, to threaten someone with that, because that takes a lot out of you too. Like the guilt from that, even just
Yeah.
not even like going to do it, it's just the thought of having that. Like, I don't know how to explain this properly, but
No, I
yeah.
hear you. I think my question, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm really just kind of speculating, but thinking about
Mm.
whether I don't think she actually would have done it.
I
Uh,
don't think that she would have either, but I don't know how long she would have stayed with the knife to his
right?
neck.
Yeah,
I feel like she would have stayed for as long as she could
and
without doing it.
it's also hard to tell Claudia's state of mind here. Yes, she said she's cared about Terry, but we also know that she's pretty cutthroat at this point.
Yeah.
And I wonder, had Rayla been willing to go through with it, whether Claudia would have been able to call that bluff, or whether Claudia would, like, who would have caved first, kind of a deal. I like that's a that was a scary moment because like I
Yeah.
was because we know that Claudia large scale is super, anti Zadia, anti elf, anti dragon. And I was worried that we were going to get to a point where like this was the moment where Claudia was been like, yeah, go ahead. And um it didn't happen that way, obviously, but this is a really tough moment.
Mm.
And I think you're right. I think what makes it bravery for Rayla and not just a scare tactic is that I wonder if it was bravery because she's like, I have to do this. This is something that I would not want to do. And I'm fearful that I might have to follow through in order to accomplish this goal of
Yeah.
preventing Erebos from coming out. Um, yeah, really fascinating moment. Ugh, this is just gut wrenching on multiple levels too, from what
Yeah.
happens. This whole scene, really, not just the knife to the throat, but like this whole scene in general. Um, what do you can we move to Terry and talk about Terry? Because
Yeah.
what I find this really interesting after, we have the trick with the coins, right? And Claudia gives fake coins, and Rayla is just like, this moment from Paula was exceptional in terms of on an acting standpoint. I was just like,
Mm.
oh my God, this is heart wrenching. Um, but then this moment where Terry's like, I have seen you do unspeakable things, and this is the first time I really thought that you were cruel. And I thought that was a really brave line.
Yeah.
Um, do you see it that way?
Yeah. Because he really stood up for himself. Claudia could have done away with him right at that moment for him saying that.
Yeah,
And he doesn't know that. Or he probably has it in the back of his mind, but doesn't want to accept the fact that she could have done that right then and there. So
yeah,
I think that is very brave of him to have said that and to have changed her mind like that because she gave the coins back to Rayla because of how much she cared about him.
yeah,
And I don't know, I'm proud of him for saying that
yeah.
to her.
And this is where I admire Terry a lot. Is I am bad at this. With the people that I love and the people that I care about, that is where I struggle the most to offer really hard feedback.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what Terry does. Terry saw that she did something that was cruel, and he called her out on it. And
Yeah.
to call out the people we love makes me feel like I get nausea. I'm feeling the nausea pulling in my stomach just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious, like, is that your experience too? Like, have you had to give hard feedback to friends or family? And I'm curious, like, what's your experience with that?
I've had to give a lot of hard feedback, especially recently,
Mm,
because For example, there was this one time with my best friend, and she still is my best friend now. Like I don't think that she ever won't be. I hope she ever won't be, but
Yeah.
um, we got into a little bit of a fight, and I had to give her a bunch of feedback because she was mentally draining me.
Mm,
And I was just trying to help her and be there for her as much as I could and give her advice because she always comes to me for advice. She always asks me for advice, and I'm going to give her the advice that she needs. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to tell her lies. If you're going to ask me for advice, it has to be truthful. I can't just give you random advice or sugarcoat your advice. You need to know the whole truth.
yeah.
And we got into a fight over this because she was like, "Oh, I want you to sugarcoat this. I can't handle like how much of a truth there is. Then why are you asking me for advice? I can't tell you lies just so that you can feel better. You need to know the truth to feel better. You can't hide away forever. You need to conquer your own thoughts. You need to actually solve your problems. You can't hide and be a coward to them."
Mm. Oh, it's so hard. Oh
Yeah.
man, I it's also I on the other side of that, I think it's often also brave. There are brave ways to receive feedback also.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the episode, I think Claudia demonstrates that. Like I think Claudia was willing to say that she got it wrong and that's why she went back versus kind of doubling down on it and saying no I didn't like right like I wasn't cruel she deserved it right like there she heard the feedback it was hard and then she made amends and fixed it versus
Yeah.
and I think that's the brave response right to actually like hear it and listen versus to get defensive and say like does that make sense.
Yeah. And I feel that like denying that you've made a mistake and stuff like that, it just shows a lot of immaturity in someone.
Mm,
And the fact that you can't come to terms that you've done something wrong is just bad. And it's it was super brave of her to actually admit that she was wrong for once because she's not a person to admit that she's wrong. She doesn't seem like the person to admit that she's wrong. But because of Terry and how much she knows that she hurt him, she was like, "Oh, I have to do something that makes this right." And
yeah.
if it wasn't for him, she wouldn't have felt remorse for what she had done.
Mm. Oh gosh, talking about this is kind of highlighting how complex bravery is. Like, because it's attached to giving and receiving feedback. It's attached to asking for help. I'm like there's a lot of different places where bravery can show up, and based off of what we talked about at the beginning, like it's not something we ever want to choose because we don't want to be put in a situation where we have to be brave. And yet here they are showing up all the time in our lives, um, which is a bummer. I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to be brave, but here we are.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's everywhere. Oh man, what a cool series of moments there from Rayla to Terry to Claudia. That's awesome. Um,
Yeah.
was there another moment or any else we want to talk about with this one?
Zubeya and Zim. Zim
Hmm.
defied Zubeya and went on the trip with us.
All
If it
season,
wasn't,
right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And he wasn't supposed to come with us to Rex's lair because Zim already knew that him and his dad, like that, the Thunder King and Rex Igneous had were not on good terms. And Zim knew that it would be very dangerous for him to come, but he was brave enough to come because he wanted to protect us and he wanted to be there for us. And I feel like that was very brave of him. And Zubeya coming in and knowing that Rex could literally just blow her into fire, like into smithereens,
Yeah.
protecting us at the end was very brave of her. I don't know how she was called. I feel like either Ezran knowing that he's probably not going to make it, like accidentally sent a signal, or Zim sent a
Hmm.
signal on accident and
I hadn't thought
because he was also gone. So I was like, oh, maybe both of them together kind of just like told Zubeya where they were because she doesn't know where Zim is. How is she supposed to know where he is? He could be
yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of I was curious about how Zubeia knew to show up at the right time also.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about the idea that, Ez or Zim could potentially communicate over distance, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. And we know that Ezran can from previous time, like the end of when they go into Zadia for the first time, Ezran's back in Catullus already, and
Yeah.
Zim is flying and blocking the moon from the moonstone path. So we know that distance works. So maybe that I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about why or how that happened. That's interesting.
And we also know that Ezran can see through, if an animal allows him, he can
Yeah.
see through their eyes. I feel like that's just for politeness. I feel like he could just do it anyways, but
Hmm.
yeah, as long as he's allowed to, then he could see through anyone's eyes. And we see him do that in, I think, an earlier episode or in this
Yeah. I
episode too.
think it was episode 6-ish.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so that's super interesting. I also wonder, there's two kind of sides to this, thinking about it could also be like one might chalk it up to like motherly instincts, right? Like, oh, he's been missing this whole time. I know he's with Ez. I sent him on this mission, and that Zim wanted to go. I almost kind of think about Zim going off as like quote teenage rebellion, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, if you were to ask a mom, hey, was this a brave decision? No, how dare they defy me? It was the worst decision they could have made. It was like, reckless
Yeah.
versus, talking to Zim and Ezran and people that are on that age bracket, being like, no, that was a really brave decision. They made the choice because that was the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, and how age can change perspective, and also like uh being someone's mother can change your perspective as well. And just,
Yeah.
it's interesting, what's bravery to whom? Is that right?
Yeah. And also, as a mother, you're going to want your kid to be safe. So even if they try and make up an excuse like, oh, I needed to help them, the mother's not always going to listen
Mm-hmm.
because what's going on in their mind is, where's my child? Where's my kid? I need to go protect my kid. They're not thinking, who's my kid protecting?
Yeah. Oof, man. Okay. Really interesting. I want to touch on what you offered us about Zubeia also,
Mhm.
in terms of showing up as an act of bravery to defend from Rex Igneous, right? At the like the final like roaring battle kind of a deal. Um, I I want to talk about Rex Igneous for a second and talk about what bravery doesn't look like. Uh,
Yeah.
it feels like Rex in this episode has kind of like lost it and is just kind of on the rampage. It seems like logic has kind of been absent ever since he got put to sleep and Claudia showed up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like bravery to chase down a bunch of humans that are very squishable. Um, and so, like, anger and rage are not forms of bravery. And yet, we see Zubeia angry, right? Standing in the face of Rex Igneous. And it feels like bravery, potentially more on the lines of bravery from Zubeia's end. So I guess talking out loud, it feels like one can be brave and angry. And also, I guess they're not like exclusive to one another. You can also
Mhm.
be angry and not be brave, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that was an interesting kind of juxtaposition between the two of them. I don't know, like they both seem like, what are they called? They're arch dragons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're both clearly very powerful. Who knows what would happen if they were to actually like for real face off?
That would be very terrifying. I
Yeah.
would be here to see it, but it'd be pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely be ready to watch that, but also like I bet they'd both be pretty pretty hurt.
Yeah.
Who knows
Yeah.
how it would turn out, but I guess we would need a more comprehensive understanding of what their powers are in order to really see who would win if they duked it out.
Mhm. Because one is like one can command thunder and storms and whatnot,
Yeah.
and then one can shoot lava from his mouth and
Yeah.
stomach and stuff.
Yeah, it's who knows, right? Like
Hmm.
fascinating. Oh, I can't. I'm ready for the compendium of like, here are all the things that these dragons can do, and then
Yeah.
we'll read that. Oh, okay. Well, we've talked about several moments. I'm excited that we've had a chance to touch on like a variety of different things. Are there, well, I guess the only thing we really haven't talked about is Janai and Kareem. Um,
Yeah.
I'm I'm curious what your reflections are on this kind of this storyline.
I don't like Kareem. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like him, and I I dislike the fact that he can turn on his sister so easily
Yeah.
because he doesn't accept her. He doesn't accept that she's a human, and we see this all the time in the real world, how people don't accept each other, and people can't just let other people live with their lives. Like they
Yeah.
always have to do something about it, even if it's not their life. If it doesn't affect you, why are you doing something about it? Like the I don't know. It just makes me angry when I think about what he does and what he's doing
Yeah.
because I've experienced stuff like that. I've been through stuff that Janai's, well, not exactly, but it's just similar about being not accepted. And
Hmm.
that's all people ever want is to be accepted. They'll do anything for exception. And Janai's very brave. She decided to fight her, well, yeah, she decided to fight her brother, even though she didn't want to protect her kingdom and to protect what she believes in.
Yeah, and I also appreciate that she's aiming to disarm. She's not aiming to kill, right? In a
Yeah,
battle where they are supposed to be aiming to kill, Janai holds and stands by her principles and
yeah,
says, "I'm not going to do this. You're my brother." And he, on the other hand, is like, "What? Like you're supposed to kill me?" And then like this idea that because I invoked this sacred historical ritual where we have to kill one another, you actually have to follow through with it. Is again, as you mentioned, a pretty common tactic of people who are trying to make their way happen, who are trying to get their own
mm,
way. And Kareem is just a sad man. Um,
yeah,
um, it's tough. Like I agree with you. I really struggle with Kareem. I definitely see things from his perspective, but I definitely
yeah.
don't agree with that perspective.
Yeah, because
um,
he, if especially since that's his sister, he should want her to be happy. When
yeah,
you care about someone, you want them to be happy. You don't want to inflict pain or hurt on them in any sort of way. If you really, really care about them, he obviously really cares about his sister and wants the best for everyone. Because I feel like even if he were to win the fight, he wouldn't have done away with her. He would have
yeah.
probably held and then told them to take her away.
You know,
But
it's interesting if we kind of frame their trajectory in bravery. I think it will be interesting because something we've mentioned is that like authoring feedback that is difficult to share, it can be a really brave act,
yeah.
right? And we see that early on in the season, Kareem tries to offer Janai feedback and he offers it and she doesn't receive it and disagrees. And I believe rightfully so. But
Yeah.
this idea that he was vulnerable and I said, hey, I really think that you're losing your way. And instead of continuing to like offer that feedback, he starts to go behind her back
Mm.
to fix things, and it seems like that is the less brave thing to do, to potentially go behind someone's back in order to create change.
Yeah, because you're not confronting the person. You're not actually telling them how they need to change or what they need to change. If you really felt that they needed to change, then one should actually tell the person and keep on
Mhm.
enforcing it in the person to get the feedback that they want or to get like like a straight line of feedback. Like just
Mhm.
this is the bottom line. This is what I'm going to tell you. I'm not changing this or I'm going to do this.
Yeah, and I think that's what created the problem is I think that he shared feedback and experienced a wall of like, nope, Janai's like, I'm not gonna change that. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if I can't, you know, get through this way, I have to go about it another way. And I think that anytime you are trying to change someone against their will, it feels like that can be a harmful form of bravery, right?
Yeah.
Like it where you might still experience that as bravery, is like this is something I have to do. I don't want to do it. I'm scared of what might happen. And like you should not really like I think that anytime you're trying to change someone's mind against their will, it feels like icky,
Yeah.
for lack of
Because
a better word.
when you get turned down that first time, you lose your bravery, but then you find a way to get it back, to gain it back, but you're gaining it in a different way. And normally the way is going to be negative. It's going to be bad. It's not going to be a healthy way of
Yeah.
going about the situation. And I can speak from experience for that because, I mean, I'm a human, and when humans don't get their way, of course, they're going to be upset. And
Yeah.
I've been upset when I don't get my way, of course. Like, I've been there.
Yeah.
But
Haven't we
it's
all?
just, yeah, but it just matters the way that you go about it. You always have to find a peaceful resolution. I feel like if you don't find a peaceful resolution, you either leave it at that or you just keep on going until you find what both of you can settle for.
Yeah, and again, going back to what we've said before, right? So we said offering the feedback and then it is a brave act. But then also we talked about how receiving that feedback was a brave act.
Yeah.
And Janai continued to say, hey, let me offer you feedback. And he continued to double down exactly
Yeah.
what we were talking about earlier of what not
Yeah.
to do, right? And so when he said, no, we're going to try this, all right, I'm going to double down. Okay, she didn't respond to this, I'm going to double down. And it just gets, and I think that is so indicative of human behavior too, even though he's an elf. Like it's indicative of who we are as people, that
Mhm.
we either are willing to break down and be vulnerable and be like, I'm wrong, or we double down and like, no, I'm super right and I'm going to show you, and it becomes problematic. And it's just really interesting how what we were talking about earlier really connects to Kareem and Janai's trajectory too.
And we see Janai try to see from his side. Kareem doesn't try to see from her side. He just wants
Mm,
to see straight forward. He doesn't have like the forgiveness or just the power to see from what she's going through or actually understand what she needs to, because when you're in an argument like that, you need, or when you're in like a situation like that, you need to see from both sides. You can't just see from your own
yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
because you're not going to reach a peaceful resolution or resolution at all at that.
yeah. So just to kind of start wrapping up about this portion of our conversation,
Mm-hmm.
um, it sounds like not all forms of bravery are helpful.
Yeah.
That's one takeaway I'm hearing. The second one is helpful bravery, to put a label on it, usually involves vulnerability, and that being exemplified by Janai, being exemplified by Ezran, who in the very beginning, right, saying like, hey, I'm going to put myself out there and ask for help. That's a very
Yeah.
vulnerable thing to do. So I'm wondering if the quote helpful bravery must involve vulnerability. I'm wondering if those two are connected in some way.
I feel that they are.
Yeah.
Because to seek help, you need to be vulnerable because now people know that you can't do this alone or you need help with it.
Yeah.
And for example, like going back to being in school, that's showing vulnerability because now you're showing to your peers and your teachers that you don't understand how to do this. So
Hmm.
they're either going to think worse of you, they're going to think, oh, you don't have the smarts to do this,
Yeah.
or I don't get why you're not understanding. There must be something not wrong with the way that they're teaching, but with the way that I'm receiving it. And they're going to think that something's wrong with the student, not that the way that they're teaching, something's wrong with the way that they're teaching.
Hmm. Ooh. Wow. Well, this has been really great. I'm really thankful that this was kind of the lens that we chose. There's a lot of really important things that happen in here, that I think I feel more informed about bravery now. Um,
Me too.
is Are there any other moments that we want to touch on before we dive into our short break?
Not that I can think of.
All right, you heard it from Sasha, folks. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to dive into our final couple of segments. And you all who have been listening all season know what's coming. We are about to nominate the Lens MVP. And I'm really excited. If this is your first episode, because you're really excited about listening to this particular episode, the Lens MVP award is someone who, from this episode, that we nominate that, for better or worse, has exemplified the lens. So in this case, our lens is bravery. And we are nominating someone who we think is really brave in this episode. And Sasha's going to nominate somebody, and I'm going to nominate somebody. And then you all, our listeners, will have the joy of voting to determine whose character is most deserving of the award. And with that in mind, Sasha, I'm going to go straight to you. Who would you like to nominate for this very, very prestigious award?
As MVP, I would nominate Janai.
Ooh, interesting. Say more. Why?
Um, Janai standing up for change in her own kingdom. People aren't accepting of the fact that she's going to marry a human and she's with a human. And especially her brother Kareem is not accepting of the fact that she's going to be with a human. And he fights her to the death. He's willing to fight her to the death for that. And she stands by her beliefs and she is very persistent on what she believes in. And if people aren't accepting of her, then she's going to do anything to make people accept the fact that she's not going to change for anyone. She is herself. She's going to accept herself. That's all she needs. All she needs is the exception from herself and to be happy with who she is.
Yeah.
And I think that that takes a lot of bravery to come to that conclusion and to be able to stand up for yourself in that sort of way.
Yeah, potentially for my detriment, I'm gonna think of something that you said reminded me of why I think Janai is a little very brave in this moment too. Is, we see her in previous episodes struggling with this decision, right? If it, I don't know that I'd be willing to call it bravery if we didn't see her struggle through it. And we
Yeah.
definitely saw her struggle. Like, she was like, this whole like two cakes moment with Amaya was was witnessing this struggle. She's like, I can't have this and this. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And Amaya's like, look, two cakes, it's fine. And I think it's her relationship with Amaya that is kind of what gives her that bravery in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really think that's an incredible nomination. I don't know if it'll stand up to my nomination, but um, it's really good. So okay, so we have Janai. Listeners, my nomination is I was actually really kind of swayed by your discussion of Zim's bravery in this episode. And so I'm going to pick Zim, a little Ozymandias. And here's why. I was in the, old fart potentially frame of mind that was like, oh, Zim's just going like because he wants to be with Ezra, and he's going because he just doesn't care what his mom says. When you kind of reframed that and said, no, he wants to do what's best for the kingdom in the same way that Ezran is doing what he thinks is best for the kingdom. And not just the kingdom, but for like Zadia at large. And I was like, that's a more generous reading of Zim that I really appreciate, that I'm really thankful to kind of have. And so I just, one, appreciate your kind of giving me that frame, but also I'm kind of bought into, you know, Zim made this decision to go into, Rex's territory, and really had a lot on his, was carrying the weight of the world in much the same way that Zim is. And I'm sorry, that Ezran is. And so I think that's a really cool experience. Huh. Who'd have thunk? So we have our two nominees, everyone. We have Janai on one hand, and we have Zim on the other. So make sure you're checking out and looking out for that poll so that you can weigh in your 2 cents to who you think deserves the award. Okay, that brings us to our final segment, which is really exciting. My favorite segment, as everyone knows, who has been a recurring listener. We're going to talk about gratitude. So I'm curious, Sasha, who is a character from this episode that you are thankful for, and why?
I'm most thankful for Terry because he showed me that you can, that I could give people feedback. Like, he talked to the most powerful person, one of the most powerful people.
Yeah.
She could do anything with him at any time with no remorse. He doesn't know if he can trust her. Well, he obviously does, but how should he know if he can trust her? Because she can just pull out of anywhere and be like, "Okay, like I'm gonna use you for something," because
Oof.
you'd have never thought that she'd have been with an elf, and like, why is she with an elf? You
Yeah.
don't know, like what her true intentions are. And he stood up for what was right, and she changed for him. She gave Rayla the coins, and she wouldn't have done that without Terry. And Terry decided to be like, "Hey, this is really wrong. I'm upset with the way that you're doing this." And it took a lot of bravery for him to do that. And it's also vulnerability at the same time too, because he's telling her what he thinks is wrong, and she could
Huh.
easily just be like, "No, this is right. Like, I'm doing the right thing. You need to get off my back." But she didn't, and she actually listened to him for once. She doesn't listen to anyone, as we've seen over the seasons, but
Yeah.
she listens to him. And that takes a lot of courage to have done what he did. So I'm very thankful for Terry, because he, people should learn that they need to stand up for themselves if they're in a wrong situation or they believe that someone has done something wrong. You need to stand up and talk about what's wrong, even if it's hurtful, even if it's bad or something. You need to stand up for what's right.
Mm. Oh, that's so good. I'm really grateful for that too. Oh, and it's so touching, right? It's just one of those things where like I I hate those moments where I like have to say like that was a real bad thing that you did. And like just the way he delivers the line, it's so clear that he cares so much. And we see it across the season. Like Terry cares so much about Claudia. And it almost becomes harder like the more you care about someone to share feedback like this. And so again,
Yeah.
I'm also incredibly grateful for Terry. That's just what a moment. Oh, so good. Okay. I'm part of me is envious that I am also thankful for Terry. Okay. Uh I am really grateful also in this episode for Ezran. And Ezran is a really interesting character in this whole season, really in the whole series. But in this season, we kind of see that he's aged a little bit. He has started making decisions and his coming into his powers. And in this episode, this moment that we see of him with Rex is one of those things where like part of me is like, bruh, get out of the way. Like you can't logic with someone who's on a rampage. Um, and on the other hand, like just so believes in the goodness of others. And that is a trait that I've really admire about Ezran, and that he's just constantly seeing the good in other people. That it makes me want to do that more. And so I think that's why I'm grateful for Ezra in this capacity, and especially in this episode.
Yeah.
Wow. We did it. We have gotten through not just this episode, but this whole season. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we will have more coming soon. And I'm as everyone has said that's affiliated, it will happen sooner than it did between seasons 3 and 4. But who knows? We don't know when it's coming out quite yet. But I'm sure we'll hear eventually. Sasha, this has been really wonderful to kind of get to know you and to hear some of your stories and hear about your life. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's like the pleasure is all mine. Uh, so if people are interested in finding you and contacting you based off of anything they hear in this episode, maybe we want to ask you a question. If you would like to be found, how would you like them to find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Sasha Zoe Rojen. And if you wanted to check out my art page, because I like to showcase my art, you can check
Yeah.
me out at Sasha Zoe's Art.
Okay. And both of those are on Instagram?
Yeah.
All right. You heard it, folks. Go follow, click the button, and check out the art. Sounds like really cool. I don't think I've checked that out, so I think I should probably do that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And of course, everyone, if you haven't done so already, you should like, subscribe, follow, do all the things on all the social medias for BNB_pod. That is our podcast. You can find us everywhere, including Patreon, which I highly recommend checking out to give us a little follow and check us out there. We have a lot of cool perks, and we recommend you dropping us a line and helping us pay our producer a living wage. That was our goal. So if you could help us do that, and if you can't help financially, don't worry. You can always just write us a 5-star review. We also love those. Awesome. Okay, this is the end of the season 4 of the Dragon Pod. Because we've finished all the episodes. Again, Sasha, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, we thank you. To Patreon supporters, you are helping us accomplish this. And without further ado, until next time, be well and do good.